Okay, great. So today I want to talk about something that I saw on Twitter, a really interesting tweet. So the tweet is a response to something that Sam Altman actually tweeted. So I'm just going to open up what Sam said, and he said, I think it's going to be more like the Renaissance than the Industrial Revolution. And this guy is called, I think, Nitesh. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. But he responded and he took this tweet and ran it through the O3 model from OpenAI. And essentially, what he was trying to do is to get a deeper understanding of what Sam Altman was saying. So I'm just going to read out what he said. The O3 model from OpenAI is the AI that unlocks the promise of personalized education. It has a never before seen ability to fill in your knowledge gaps and teach you new subjects in an easy to skim but dense tutorial. I just asked you to teach me about the Renaissance and Industrial Revolution from the context of Sam Altman's tweet below. So the prompt that he put, it's pretty basic, it's pretty straightforward, like what he's asking it to do. But I think what was really impressive is the response from O3. So he shared the link to the response, and I'm just going to go through the chat he had with it because I found it really, really profound. So this is the prompt that he wrote. You can read that if you want, but essentially he's just asking it to explain this tweet in the context of the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution so that he can get a better understanding of what Sam was trying to articulate. So let's just go through the response. So it says he's reacting to OpenAI's brand new O series model, just dropped, and the type of change AI unleashes looks less like steam-powered factories uprooting manual labor, which is the Industrial Revolution, and more like a sudden society-wide unlock of human creativity and ideas, the Renaissance. So then it goes down to unpack that. And it speaks firstly of the Renaissance. When was it? 1300s to 1600s, and the location Florence, Venice, Italy. And then what were the catalysts that kicked off the Renaissance, right? Wealthy city-states, the Medicis, and then the revival of ancient Greek Rome. It takes the printing press from Gutenberg, cheap books, and a flood of scholars westward. What was the core vibe of the Renaissance? So we have humanism with faith and individual potential. Man is the measure. Artists, engineers, and philosophers blur together. So you have people like Leonardo coming up, and it says he was doing sketches of helicopters next to paintings. And then what were the signature outputs from the Renaissance? And we have perspectives in art. And if you look at what's happening with AI, a platform like Sora, it's redefining what art is. Models like Midjourney, and then even when you think of videos, really changing what we consider art. And then anatomical studies, literature. A lot of these models are LLMs, like large language models, so they're definitely going to redefine what we consider literature, right? And then the early establishment of a scientific method of studying the world, and you've got the banking and double entry accounting. I haven't really seen how exactly AI has started to affect banking and double entry, but I'm sure in time it'll emerge. And then it goes down to break down the Industrial Revolution. It speaks of when did this happen? So that's 1700s to, let's say, 1840. So it's the century after the end of the Renaissance. And I guess the Renaissance set the foundation, or the intellectual foundation, that would then power the Industrial Revolution. So Sam kind of feels it's the same with AI, where the first wave of AI is going to be more of a Renaissance. And then once that era is done, it sets up the base for a more Industrial Revolution type of change in our society. So let's hear more about the Industrial Revolution. So we've got steam engines, that's your trains, right? Then textile inventions, we've got your spinning jenny, your power loom. Then we've got cheap coal and iron. And the core vibe of this era is mechanization, where we're replacing muscle with machines and we concentrate labor in factories, scale output. What are the signature outputs of this era? We have mass-produced cotton, railways, the telegraph, internal combustion engines, and global trade networks. So those are the characteristics of the two eras, the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. It's a really great breakdown so far from this O3 model. And then it starts to contrast the differences. And remember what it's trying to do? It's really trying to teach this person what this period was about, the differences between the periods, and then link it back to what Sam Altman is saying about AI and what's happening right now. So let's continue reading. what was the primary fuel of the Renaissance? So it was ideas, art, science, printing, which kind of makes sense. If you look at where we are right now, I would say these three things are changing quite a lot. The ideas, because now we're collaborating on ideas with artificial intelligence. Art, definitely all these models that are generating tons of artistic images. And science, a lot of scientific research is now accelerated due to these LLMs. And printing, I haven't really seen the impact of printing so far, but yeah, I think in time it will emerge. And then we go into the Industrial Revolution. The primary fuel, we have coal, which turns to steam, which turns to electricity. And then, what are the hero archetypes in each period? What are the type of people that are celebrated in each one of the periods, right? We have the polymath creator, which is Leonardo, Michelangelo, right? And then in the Industrial Revolution, we have the inventor and the factory owner. So we've got Watt and people like Henry Ford. The next thing it speaks of is the means of diffusion. Like, how does this change in society spread? So in the Renaissance, it spreads through cheap books. I could draw an analogy that AI is spreading through cheap models, right? The cheaper the models, the more people can get access to them. And as information is spreading through universities and workshops, definitely I see AI spreading through those means also. And then in the Industrial Revolution, this diffusion of the change in society is going through the factories, through railways, through colonial trade. Totally different way of spreading. And what are the effects on labor? So the Renaissance upskills the scholars. The people that were in the thinking space were really given tools to level up their abilities and be able to produce more. So the scholars and the artists really start to flourish. And I would argue that that's exactly the same that's happening with AI right now. And what's actually interesting is that few jobs were destroyed outright by the Renaissance. I don't know if that is exactly true with AI. It's a more powerful technology than what was happening with the Renaissance. So I would argue maybe that's not exactly a one-to-one parallel between the Renaissance and what's happening right now. So, because definitely some jobs are going to be lost. So let's see how that goes. And then the effect on labor in the Industrial Revolution is it automates manual crafts. So everything that was being done by manual labor is now being done by machines, and millions migrate to wage labor instead of subsistence living. And then the last point that it raised in trying to explain this is where the value lives, intangible, knowledge, aesthetics, and new worldviews. That's very true. If you look at what ChatGPT produces, right, it's knowledge, aesthetic things, and new worldviews. It's like if you run your thoughts through an AI, you're able to see a different perspective of the world. I personally call AI a mirror for the mind. You can see your thoughts. You can give your thoughts to this machine, and it can give you a new perspective on them. And then when we look at where the value lies in the Industrial Revolution, it's in actual tangible things where we have cloth, iron, and locomotives. So I just want you to see where we are in terms of how good of a breakdown this is. This is all coming from a tweet. He just asked it to explain what the tweet meant and link it up with his current understanding of the Renaissance. He has a very basic understanding of the Renaissance. It's gone on to make such a comprehensive breakdown. And I'm just going to continue going through this until we're done, so that we can really fully understand how powerful this O3 model is at explaining concepts and teaching you things in a way that really opens up your mind and helps you synthesize information in a more powerful way. So then point 4 is also talk about, so why does Sam Altman say AI equals the Renaissance? And it starts to draw the parallels. So the printing press democratizes knowledge. And the parallel of that in terms of what's happening right now is we now have these models where people are releasing open weight models or open source models, right? And low cost APIs spread advanced models worldwide. So that makes sense. The AI models themselves are like the printing press that disseminate knowledge. I would say in the Renaissance, the books were spreading knowledge, but in this artificial intelligence era, the models are spreading intelligence. So they're almost parallels, like knowledge and intelligence are almost opposites of each other. So it's very interesting to see those parallels. And then you have patronage. It lets small teams create timeless art. The parallel that's drawn there is cloud credits, open source, let indie hackers ship GPT powered apps from their bedrooms. Definitely. And another interesting point it raised is this cross disciplinary mashup where art and engineering are sort of mixed into one thing. And the parallel is the same thing happening in this age of AI where we have multimodal reasoning across text, code, images, audio in one brain, right? So where we had in the Renaissance, you had individuals that could understand different fields because of all the dissemination of knowledge. Now we have intelligent systems that can understand multiple fields and multiple modalities of information. So that's also interesting. And then at the end, it gives a very nice and concise TLDR that goes through everything that he just spoke about. It speaks of the Renaissance as being idea driven, decentralized, unlocking human creativity, industrial revolution, machine driven, centralized, scales production and distribution. And then the airways looks Renaissance-ish, Renaissance-ish, because it hands every individual a thinking, creating sidekick, but expect some industrial scale upheavals in labor and capital markets. Altman's tweet is a nudge to focus on the upcoming explosion of art, science, and personal agency that these new models enable before we obsess over factory floor job losses. So I think one of the biggest takeaways that I was thinking about personally is when it spoke of the time periods of the Renaissance into the Industrial Revolution. So the Renaissance, let's call it what, 200, 250 years, somewhere there. And then the Industrial Revolution is a bit faster. Let's call that 80 years, right? And the question is, if we are in the Renaissance age with regards to artificial intelligence, when does the Industrial Revolution come? I would argue that these time periods are not reflective of what's going to happen in our age. I would argue that maybe the Renaissance in terms of AI is just 20 years, and after 20 years, we're already in the Industrial Revolution. And after that, who knows what comes along. So it's going to be very interesting to live through the next 3 to 4 decades as us, as individuals, as societies, as countries, as nations, try and adjust to this change, because definitely the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution caused significant changes globally. So we're going to live through this and have to navigate it. So it's going to be a very, very interesting time. So those are my thoughts on this tweet. I would say if you have access to the O3 model, really try and leverage it to the best of your abilities and see what you can accomplish with it. Cheers.